to work through this thing was good because it makes you and forces you to, produce and to, start like setting markers for yourself of like, okay, I've worked through this thing, that thing, the other thing, and it forces you to call for help, because otherwise you will actually try to take it all on by yourself if you're given quite a lot of time to do it. You will try and learn how to do this thing that you're really not equipped to do. And I think it forces you to allow yourself to connect with people, to be open to, also like, it's not just about people trusting you, it's you kind of letting you yourself trust other people to translate what you're doing. You became the director of your vision for your final images that you've created alongside the sculpture, and it took a lot of trust in the people around you to say, can you please help me describe this thing? And so that also takes a lot to move through.
Before we continue unpacking this topic, we would like to give a big thank you to ORMS, without whom this wonderful podcast would not be possible. ORMS is a cornerstone of the creative community in South Africa, offering industry-leading support, the latest gear, and world-class display options to photographers, artists, and visual creators, both locally and internationally. As always, you can find out everything you need to know by visiting ormsdirect.co.za. The link can also be found in the show notes for this episode. Now let's get back to the discussion.
I think, we've definitely covered a lot within this kind of conversation session, and I'm just wanting to get from your side, what advice do you think you'd give to someone? First, I suppose, considering to apply for this thing, what is the most challenging thing that you had to deal with that you think that somebody else should know about coming into this space? We've kind of already covered a lot of points, but I think if you want to put a pressure point on anything that you think is important that someone really considers before they move through this.
I think the most challenging thing during that time was having to finance most of my pre-prod, right?
Yeah.
As having to finance the sculpture, having to finance the smoke machine, all the things, right? It was all that. It was having to finance, traveling back and forth from my place to the studio, and also knowing that you can't work on other things during that time.
Yeah.
So I started off financially able, but then as time went by, as the resin hardened too slowly, and I had to get other ones, or the first plaster thing didn't work out.
Yeah.
There were so many different things that had so many costs.
Yes.
And doing this thing and then having to continue the next day, but still have to bring catering, because what I also wanted to do was that if people are giving of their time and in their space and their hands and all of that, the least I could do, if I can't pay them because finances were hard, I would, and drinks and all of that, so that people at least would be like, wow,
I felt cared for.
But I also learned to be. Yes, everything was calculated. There was nothing that was, everything was coming from me. At some point I had to get creative, so I wrote Woolies and Woolies and food vouchers, which was OG. I love that. And then there was now a time when if there would be a production, I'd get food from Woolies and all of that. Now people were eating that food. But everything else was still on me. I was still paying for transport, paying for this, paying for that, and all of these costs were adding up.
Yes.
And as the cost added up, I stressed. I can't lie, Lauren. There were times when I'd be so stressed I couldn't sleep because I'd be because I knew it had to be done. but at the same time, my parents worked because they didn't understand, right? And so I could not call home. As much as I called my sisters and they'd help me out with like, 500 rand, all of that, but they were still also just like, yo, sis, you can't ask for so much money,
Yes.
And so I had to be resourceful. I had, and I mean, whoa, like things also came together. Things came together with the gospel. God came alive for the girl, because then there'd be times I'm flat broke, there's nothing. And then I do my taxes and I get cash money. And then the next day I'm off it again. There was always like, that's what I'm like. What I'm saying about this journey is that it was so hectic and it was intense, because 1 minute I'm stressed out, then the next minute breakthrough, then the next minute I'm like, oh my God, like a roller coaster of emotions. But what I can say is that I was being stretched. Consistently, I was stretched. So honestly, like my hardest thing was finance, because it did not hinder me from doing the things that I did, but everything had to be extra, like, considered. Every single thing had to be calculated. It taught me a lot, but I also think that, like, had I not, I feel like a lot of energy was wasted stressing about money.
Yeah, true.
And I could have used a lot of my energy for other things.
True.
And for my work, rather than thinking about finances. And let me, I think about something else that was hard. I mean, I really, like, honestly, the time that I was given, because it was longer than I had ever been given, the time was fine for me.
Yeah.
I was okay with time. I was also like, I was really grateful for, people like Annalisa, Gemma, who would come in slightly with the most gentleness, remind me of my deadline.
Yeah.
Because the girlie, as much as I try to stay on top of things, I would get so overwhelmed that they'd be like, Yanela, you have to submit this. And I'm like, okay, I'll do it. And then 2 days later, I still haven't done it. And I'm looking at them like, hey, guys, I know you still want my bio, but I don't have it, things like that. And I liked, a lot of how I was assisted in the program by the people who had taken on, mentor roles. And, because I felt as much as it wasn't as structured as I don't know, I thought about, I'm now veering off and I'm like going on a tangent, but bear with me, right? I thought about structure, right? And I thought about the need for structure. As much I needed structure, but at the same time, I also enjoyed not having structure. Yeah. So, do you know what I'm saying? Because
I get the vibe.
I feel like because I feel like sometimes I needed structure and I needed a push, and sometimes I needed to be left alone. And that's one thing that I can't necessarily put down as a hardship or anything, because it was changing depending on the time, depending on what was required and what I needed. It was always changing. But honestly, going back, the hardest thing was finance. The hardest thing was having to balance everything and having to carry such a huge load, because it was a load, and also because I was sure I wanted a sculpture, and I was sure I wanted certain things, and I did not want to compromise on them.
Yeah.
And because I was like, for me, it was just like if this is my opportunity to introduce myself, I need to introduce myself fully, not within limitations what I'm trying to explore being limited. I can't do that.
100%.
I need to stretch the bounds of my limits. And I mean, even like Lauren, even the money thing was within my process because the way I stretched that cash money, I took 500 rand, made pots with 500 rand. We have images. That for me, I'm like, even though it was tough, I stretched that limit, and those things, they become part of my process as much as I don't like them, I didn't want them, but, it is what it is. And it was what was happening at the time. But I mean, with all that said, I still think that like, had I not had to worry about certain things, I would have been
be able to create more freely, I guess. I think what you said is important for, so in terms of, I think one thing to recognize from the get-go is that this is an intensive program and it is something that demands a lot of you, regardless of the time commitment. I guess it also demands a level of, I suppose, commitment to kind of producing something. And a commitment to the process and a commitment to the work that is needed, that is both on a physical level, on an emotional level, on a XYZ whatever dot ellipsis continued level. And I think something to recognize as well is that you are supported through that moment, but a lot of it is also stuff that you have to grapple with on your own because only you can find specific answers through doing the process and the work. Then I think another thing that you pointed out was practicing under limitations. I'm going to get to the funding specific aspect in a minute, but I think whatever project you're working with, however much funding that you receive or don't receive, you are going to be working with a number of limitations that is, what do you now have access to that you didn't before? What can you do with those resources, and how can you really utilize those things? How, when somebody gives you a contact number, an email address, or introduces you to XYZ person, do you actually follow up on those things? Do you actually, push that and kind of take those resources on? What questions are you asking throughout the program that is not necessarily things that were detailed in that, but things that you're just curious with for yourself. I think these are all important things that you can already start grappling with before you even kind of apply for the program in and of itself. It's important to know those kinds of questions and things for yourself, like what would I need to establish this thing? When I get it, what will I do with it? And what do I have now that I can start making things with? I think the most beautiful thing about image making right now and going forward is that technology is an amazing thing, and you can do a lot with very little. Self-publishing via social media networks, via online resources is in a very amazingly accessible tool as far as possible. There are ways to get access to the internet if it's not something that you have readily by yourself, if public libraries or such and such open again. But I think the very most important thing that is a massive challenge for a lot of institutions and programs and mentorships and residencies is this massive thing of funding. And in programs also, it's something that I've also struggled with for the ORMS Cape Town School of Photography scholarship program, where, there is an amount of money that gets put forward for the program, but inevitably that amount of money doesn't always cover everything. And so when it comes to this artist in residency, I know that the moment of you needing to use from your own funding, your personal kind of funding to kind of push your project forward was a massive ask. And so, we really did have that moment of sitting down with you towards the end of your program and kind of looking at, what were these pressure points for you and what can we improve? And we've taken that forward definitely into this year. And continued and will continue running through that kind of process of checking in with artists as they're moving along to see what is it that can make the process easier, so that going forward into the next cohort, or the next program run, that we make sure that that person is well supported. And I think the other thing is that knowing that, your program term for being part of the ORMS Circle Mentorship Program hasn't ended. You are a kind of lifetime circle member in that way. And like each year, that's something really beautiful about the program is that
in for life.
Yeah, unfortunately, you're in for life, my friend. And I think that's something that's really beautiful because, you know, the things that we're implementing now into this program, so you're not going to miss out on. You know, you're going to be enriched with through conversations. You're going to be able to, you know, contribute to the conversation and help the next artist, you know, when they're in this very similar space to you, say like, I know that you're feeling this right now. This is how I handled it. It might be useful for you as a tool and a practice to push forward. So yeah, I mean, I personally have also gone through a couple of these kinds of things, and so, you know, I'll also be around in there to help this person out, whoever they may be, to move through that. So also this year to kind of extend on both the kind of network of people that the artist and the circle kind of has access to, as well as helping out with the funding aspects of things. We've partnered with both the ORMS Cape Town School of Photography and Market Photo Workshop up in Johannesburg. And the wonderful Legeto is our kind of main contact person on that side in at the Market Photo Workshop, and I'm the representative from ORMS Cape Town School of Photography. And through this collaboration, we have managed to get funding for kind of the living expenses and transport and accommodation type things, and some extra materials costs that will really help to offset some of these costs that came off your kind of very personal account in that run. So hopefully in the, you know, going forward into the program, that should not be something that hinders the process of the artists to come through this program. And, you know, the more support that we are able to collect over, you know, the upcoming years through this program, it's going to be a really amazing thing. And also for this year, through the collaboration with the Market Photo Workshop, they run very amazing photography programs, and also host a incubator program, which is also a mentorship program that assists with kind of, you know, artists or photographers who are wanting to further their professional practices. We'll go through a program for 6 months that will kind of help through consultations with people within the industry to better establish their professional business practices. And ORMS and ORMS Cape Town School of Photography will also be kind of assisting on that program through the partnership. So it's going to be a really, really amazing opportunity for this year and going forwards for the ORMS Circle Mentorship Program, whereby this person, not just through the 8 weeks of the program where they will be producing work and moving through a similar process to what we've been through, they will also have the opportunity to carry their kind of moment forward in the support through the incubator program. So we're extremely excited about going forward with this project, and we're so excited to have you on board as one of the mentors going forward into the future of the program.